And I invite our second speaker in this section, Dr. Yeslam Al-Sagaf. Sagaf, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Maya, for the tour yesterday. I feel included. First time. Correctly pronouncing your name? Pojan. Yes. And also I want to thank my lunch partner. We talked about inclusivity during the lunch, so thank you for that. Today's topic I'm really pleased to be here because I feel like I have a duty to raise awareness about this social phenomena. I don't know if you heard of the term before called Phubbing, P-H-U-B-B-E-D, or in this case, P-H-U-B-B-I-N-G. It's a phenomenon when you take the phone while you're talking to someone, face to face. It's very common in Australia. It's very common in my country, my part of the world. I've visited Spain recently. I spent 2 months, and I didn't see it as common. I've been here now for 2 days, and I'm looking at it as very healthy still among even young people. I think that's a good thing, but we need to keep tab on it. We need to keep an eye on that phenomenon so that it doesn't get out of hand. So let me share with you a project that I recently completed in Australia. The title is Digital Exclusion, and I must thank the reviewer of my paper because this is what I like to go to a conference where it's quite different. It brought me to the idea that I can think outside the box about my phenomena. I usually research Phubbing as a social behavior from a psychological point of view. But this time I'm thinking of it as a form of social exclusion. So let me have a quick look. I'm only focusing in this project at the reaction of the person being phubbed by someone else using the phone in a face-to-face setting. So the digital exclusion in this case arises not because, as I'm thinking, because the person being ignored doesn't have a smartphone, but because that person wants to be talking in person to the other person, but they are being ignored by the phone. And that's why there is that dichotomy. So there is digital exclusion by the behavior of the phubber, the person doing the phubbing. But there is social exclusion by the person being phubbed. You can see the difference between the two. So on one hand, you have the person using the phone wanting to be digitally included, but at the same time, the person whom they are with feeling socially excluded. They don't want to be having to look at someone looking at their phone. So again, I thank the reviewer for reconceptualizing this from this point of view. In terms of the psychology, so phubbing has been a very promising phenomenon in the literature. It has been studied well. There's a lot of attention on what predicts this behavior. There's addiction, there's fear of missing out, there is personality traits, loneliness, attention difficulties, boredom, self-esteem, emotional support need, relative deprivation. All these factors contribute to why people use their phone in face-to-face settings, why some of you even now looking at their phone during this meeting. In terms of the outcomes of this behavior, what are the psychological effects of this behavior? There's depression, there's a large of it. Depression, maybe it looks a bit naive, but it's actually damaging to the person. It can cause depression, it can cause aggression among teenagers, it can create cyberbullying, it can create anxiety, especially between couples, it can create loneliness. There's also addiction as a cause and also as an effect. And it can deteriorate the communication skills between people as well as they become more and more into their phone. For relationships between partners, romantic partners, it can create a lot of stress because you are thinking that the phone is more important than the partner. And it has other effects like life satisfaction with the relationship. I wrote a book in 2022 on this topic, and one of the two things I found relevant to phubbing is that there's not lack of attention to the mental well-being of those who are experiencing being phubbed. And also, there's not much attention on how children phubbing affects parents phubbing. Sometimes we worry about the parents phubbing the children, but in this case, we're also thinking about how about children phubbing their parents as well. In my case, I am a parent too, and I'm offended by my children doing this all the time, especially on the dinner table. So I'm interested in the experience of being phubbed using qualitative research, which is very limited at the moment. There's not much on that, and also using silent observation as my technique. So again, thinking about this as a form of a divide between those who crave digital connectivity versus those who crave face-to-face interaction. Again, in Spain, I felt that the circumstances are good. There's healthy interaction between students. They're having fun. They're talking without the phone in the middle. But in the case of Australia, as you can see this image, for example, this child is phubbing his father, and this young trade person is phubbing his senior colleague. And these images are common in Australia and overseas as well. But in Slovenia, I feel it's not that bad. I feel there is a lot of people working together, sitting together, and maybe sometimes using the phone as a way to maybe communicate with each other, to show something to each other. So that's something, but keep in mind that I think as the more we go south, the south are more social. I feel that the way you go north, maybe in China, for example, it will be very, I don't know the experience in China, but I've seen in Japan, for example, and China, there is a lot of heavy dependence on the smartphone, and in Australia, certainly. So how is the person being phubbed, which is a common experience that not always looked at? Normally, what we people look at is who the phubber is and what they are doing, but not the reaction to being phubbed. What's keeping them from continuing the conversation when they are phubbed? The person who's on the phone, they can use their smartphone too, but they don't want that. They want to use their face-to-face conversation for social connection, for the warmth of the shoulder with each other. And I think that's, as I mentioned, it's creating a divide between those who favor the phone versus those who favor the in-person connection. Let me just give you a bit of brief touch on the methodology. So the methodology, as I mentioned, I used silent observation. I conducted silent observation outside cafe because it gives me the idea of doing observation without interfering with the person doing the phubbing. And also because this time the phubbing is happening in natural places like cafes, and I stayed outside the cafe, not inside the cafe. It has to be outside for ethics approval, so outside the cafes. So the phubbing or the collection of data happened or occurred in line with the ethics approval from my university. It took place in 2023 to 2024 and 25, just at the beginning of it. And again, it just focused on the reaction to being phubbed using three prepared set of questions using as a checklist. I call it an observational checklist that has pre-prepared set of structured questions. And I try to have answers for those questions as well. So the questions have responses that are predetermined. I think that's a bit of a mistake from me because I thought I can capture this complex experience using those categories. But it's something to learn from it as well. So the first group of questions focused on the setting where the phenomena took place. And the second group of questions focused on the phubber's act, the person doing the phubbing, whereas the third group of questions focused on the reaction of the person experiencing being phubbed by someone else. Now, each question also, as I mentioned, had predetermined responses, and these responses were categorized according to the groups of these questions. But also, I had a checkbox which is free, and I think that checkbox, that text box, was very helpful in capturing raw data from the experience that I am observing. I didn't spend too much time doing these observations. I only focused on 105 records because I thought I'll just get an idea of the method. But hopefully I'll do this in a different way in future. So the findings, my finding is that first, let me focus on the setting that I collected the data from. So as you can see, phubbing occurred most among settings or environment where there are 11 to 20 people. So that's where maybe people thought they are relatively kind of invisible, or a bit of anonymity that will give them, they won't feel intimidated or shy from doing that observation. The next one is the number of people who are involved in the phubbing. So as you can see, those involved in the phubbing more in dyads. We're talking about couples, best friends, twos. People in twos are doing phubbing more compared to people in larger groups. And I think that's a bit dangerous because I will explain later on. When you are in a dyad, when you are just with one person, it means the other person doesn't have anyone else to talk to. So they need to occupy themselves or feel awkward with that phubbing behavior. The presenting age of the individual being phubbed, as you can see, again, the young people are doing it more to each other. So these are the 18 to 24 and 25 to 35 are engaged more in this behavior. I did the research a long time ago, also found that young couples and best friends are doing this phubbing more because there is social capital amongst them. They don't feel bad if they do it because the person who phubbed them knows that the person receiving the phubbing can forgive them, so they can do it easier. But in terms of the presenting gender of the person receiving the phubbing, as you can see, female are being phubbed more than male in this study, which is interesting, again, from a power point of view and from inclusivity and exclusivity. Maybe the females, and I'm not judging, a bit more social in that sense than the males, or maybe the males, they are busier, they are busier, they can go onto their phone when they are talking to their romantic partner or their best friend. When it comes to the Phubbers Act, which is a different set of groups, this is the second group of observation. In terms of the Phubbers Act, the phubber initiated the phubbing. There's nothing that triggered this phubbing. It's not like the phone rang or sent an alert or a notification. It's the phubber deliberately pick up the phone to engage in the phubbing, as you can see from the first group of this diagram. So this act is deliberate, unprovoked. And in terms of the questions on the Phubbers Act, also in terms of the duration, this is deliberate. It lasted more than a minute. It's consistent, and it means it's not temporary to just look at the phone quickly for something important or urgent. It means then it's intentional, someone engaged in the phubbing and kept the other person unoccupied. Now, for the questions on the Phubbers Act as well, and this is something that was not on the paper, but I added for completion. The Phubbers Act immediately after taking their phone is that they went to social media. You can see them scrolling the smartphone. It's not like they went into a text mode or they went into a phone call or something else. It clearly, they were just maybe bored with the conversation or wanted to alleviate the fear of missing out. So they went on social media, maybe on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or whatever, but it was a social media, but it's not 100%, of course, clear. Now, I want to focus quickly on the reaction of the person being phubbed. As you can see, the reaction is largely neutral, because in Australia, for example, it's very common. It's not a big deal to be phubbed. what about in Slovenia? I would be very interested to see how that experience, maybe keep an eye on it in cafes. And does anyone complain? Does anyone argue? Does anyone become upset? Can they walk away? Can they say, can you please focus on me? And I'm talking to you. I don't know. But in Australia, it's very common. And I think the fact that it's common is alarmed, but it also means it's a normalized behavior and it's a concern as well. So my qualitative observation is one, for example, I saw a mother crossing the traffic light with one baby on one hand, the smartphone on the other, and she was scrolling. Today, there was a lady also in Slovenia from just outside the hotel. She was with her baby on the pram. She was also smoking, so the baby has a second smoke experience as well, and she was on the phone. But that's very interesting. But this one is, she's crossing the traffic light with one hand on the phone and the other with the baby, so it's a bit very, very interesting, authentic experience. I took this from my country here. Recently, I was in the Middle East, and I saw 3 men sitting at a restaurant, middle class, with the third one from another class. So in a good way, they were having a meal together, eating from the same dish, enjoying that meal together without issue with social class, having fun, very inclusive, no divide there in terms of social status, but the divide was on the phone. Each one, except the one with the lower class, was not on his phone. They were both on their phone. There's a bit of phubbing of the elderly in those observations that I noticed. The elderly are more susceptible to being phubbed by their maybe younger adult children. And also the children phubbing their parents is very common too. Now, some continued phubbing while the phubbing is happening. Others felt uncomfortable, and there's a revenge phubbing. If you phub me, I'll take the phone. I will also use it to occupy myself as well. But it's very uncomfortable, very awkward until now in many places. So to summarize, phubbing can be considered as a manifestation of a divide where one can be digitally included, but at the same time, they are also socially excluding the person whom they are with, who they took the effort to make an appointment to meet in person, have a coffee together or an ice cream or go together, but yet they are on their phone busy with what's happening online. I think dyadic interactions are a danger because these are two. If one is taken away from it, it's a bit of an issue for them because they can't become in the conversation. They are excluded from that conversation. So in contrast, if it's a group, it's common. So maybe you can, if you are 3, you can go to the next person to talk to while the other person is busy with their phone. Anyway, I'll stop there to see, guys, if you have any comments or any issues. But in the end, again, I want to thank the reviewer for making me think about phubbing as a divide between those who wants to be face-to-face and those who wants to be digitally included. Thank you so much.